It sure doesn't feel like the political influence is decreasing. I would say that it feels like it's peaking. If anything, like this is, I don't think we've ever seen government as big as it is today. So are you saying as time progresses and more people migrate to a Bitcoin standard, that's when the political influence, like that's when politics kind of takes a backseat?
No, I think it's true today. I think it depends on your frame of reference. You said that it feels like the political is peaking. Well, it's like, well, you could say it's peaking, but you also could say it's about to be dwarfed by whatever's next.
Mm.
It depends on your frame of reference. Yeah, looking backwards over the last 50, 60, 70 years, like political influence globally is like more terrifying than it's ever been. However, if you look forward the next 30 years, I, I hate to say it, but I think that we're in the good times, say, quote unquote. I think whatever level of centralization or corruption in this current paradigm is only going to be worse in the future than the past. And if instead of saying, or instead of viewing the world as getting darker and darker because we're looking at it from this political lens, we look at it from this other lens. I think the world's getting brighter. I mean, take Bitcoin as an example. Its hash rate is either at all-time highs or near all-time highs. Its price is currently in a bear market, but its current price is above the all-time highs of 2017, by a considerable margin, and its trading volume is considerably higher. I mean, it's like, like right now, besides price not being an all-time high, pretty much every metric for Bitcoin's at an all-time high. At wallet addresses, wallet addresses that have one Bitcoin's at an all-time high. The number of nodes is at an all-time high. The number of hash rate is at an all-time high. The number of nations that own Bitcoin on their balance sheets is at an all-time high. The number of nations that have it as a legal tender is at an all-time high. It's like, for Bitcoin, it has never been in as good of a spot as it is today. And I think looking forward, it's like today are the dark times for Bitcoin. It's only going to get better. So I think everything you're saying is correct, but I think it depends on perspective. If we're looking in that one perspective of the red line that goes down at continued 90% losses forever, it's like, looking back, it's never been worse, but looking forward, it's never going to be as good as it is right now. And that's why it's so important for people to get off zero, because you have these two lines, the one that's going up and the other that's going down, and the disparity from the one line decreasing to the other line increasing only gets larger. So right now, the difference is not very much, but continue it out a few years, the difference will get much worse. And then, as it just gets more and more exponential. So, say if we go out 20 years, or go out 10 years or 15 years, or however many years you want to, if we assume that the current system is much more corrupt than it is today, much more centralized and with much more information and much more chaos than it is today, and we also assume that Bitcoin is doing much better than it is today, not just price, but also like the network and the network stability. It's like the transition costs for people trying to escape the one and get into the other. It is just it becomes only more difficult. It's kind of like transitioning from newspaper to online web articles as a media company in 2000 versus 2005 versus 2010 versus 2020. It's like the transition costs of you migrating your audience from one medium, from one paradigm to the other medium and paradigm only gets exponentially more difficult. And you don't know at what point you're going to go bankrupt, but inevitably you will. It's just a matter of when. And likewise today, it's like inevitably Bitcoin will take over everything else, I believe. It's just a matter of when. And the probability of that happening, in my view, will only go up exponentially. And the transition cost of moving over will only go up, which is why I think it's completely idiotic to have a 0% allocation. Like, it's been 14 years. How many more years do you want? It's like, if you're a risk manager, how many more years do you want under Bitcoin's belt? It's like, the Federal Reserve is barely a 30% uptime. If not even that, Bitcoin is up like 24/7, 365 with zero audits. Excuse me, the Fed is like zero audits, and Bitcoin has an audit every 10 minutes. It's like, it's very concerning. And I genuinely think most people are going to learn the hard way. Most people will learn, but they'll either learn through giving it an extreme amount of thought, kind of like how we're doing now, and then they'll be transitioned before it's happened, or they will be forced to learn through the brutal nature of creative destruction. And I think the people that should be making the transition right now are the precise kinds of people that will make the transition too late. Because again, if we think of this from a psychology perspective, okay, financial advisors, money managers, hedge fund managers, And people that manage political currency units have been trained for thousands of hours to understand how the political currency unit system works and where its risks are and how to allocate for risk within that system. They are not trained to think outside the system. They are never trained to think outside the system. It's like, yeah, I've given this metaphor before, but I think it's worth saying again. It's like taking someone in, the early 19th century, the 1800s, that has been breeding horses their entire life. They went to school for 4 years or 8 years, or perhaps even 12 years to learn how to breed horses and make better horses, stronger horses, more beautiful horses, whatever your metrics are for determining the best horse. They've been trained for so long to make the best horse that when you present to them a locomotive, it has no indication to them of being of something of value. And it's not because they're stupid. It's just their brains have been trained for thousands of hours to not recognize that. They aren't being trained. They aren't being trained with the question, how do we get the most number of people from point A to point B in the most efficient manner possible? They've been trained, how do I make a better horse? And those are two very different things. And likewise today, I believe our brains and our money managers that have been trained for decades to how do I diversify my purchasing power in a mixed basket of assets, securities, and consumer goods to lose the least amount of purchasing power possible as a currency basis. Like, that's what they're trained to do. They're not trained to think, how do I find the best money possible?